Hello, everyone. So I was censored, banned for a week by YouTube. Last week I wrote, I am blocked for uploading to YouTube because I merely uploaded, then deleted a video about YouTube censorship of Ivermectin. It was never public. In fact, I'd already deleted the video myself the day before YouTube gave me a strike for it. What the F? Now, before I go into telling this story in more detail, I'm going to read a disclaimer. This is from Trial Site News, which has been covering what is a YouTube channel that's been covering the story of ivermectin and how scientists are looking into it as a serious possible treatment and prevention for COVID-19. It's a cheap, widely available drug that actually won the Nobel Prize in 2015 for its anti-parasitic purposes. So here we go. I'm just got to read this disclaimer. I don't want to lose my YouTube channel, so I don't want more strikes. So here we go. So just let me go through this. The information presented is solely for educational purposes. Never disregard professional medical advice. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment in regards to any patient. Treatment for an individual patient should rely on the judgment of your physician or other qualified health provider. Always seek their advice with any questions you may have regarding your health or medical condition. Duh. Okay. So got that out of the way. Here's the story. So in January, YouTube removed videos of a U.S. Senate committee hearing that discussed worldwide evidence from many countries around the world suggesting that ivermectin, a cheap and widely available drug, could effectively prevent and treat COVID-19. This month, when Senator Ron Johnson and Dr. Brett Weinstein continued the discussion with new evidence, YouTube removed their videos and suspended each of their YouTube channels for allegedly sharing medical misinformation. So, sharing actual studies, real data from multiple countries, sharing a meta-analysis of all this data from all around the world that suggests that ivermectin can be an effective preventative treatment. Just saying the fact that evidence suggests this. Now, that gets you censored by YouTube. Needless to say, that's really effed up. So let's go on. So now, I don't know if you guys have seen this video. YouTube censored the Senate crime of the century that I made. But thankfully, this video documenting this story of censorship of ivermectin is still up on YouTube, at least for the time being. Oddly enough, however, YouTube has banned me from uploading and live streaming for 1 week because of unpublished rough cuts of the same video. Obviously, this period has ended. I'm able to live stream now. It's always been a regular part of my workflow to upload private cuts to YouTube for 2 reasons. Let me move this. So 1, to see if YouTube recognizes any violations or issues that could lead to demonetization, so I can fix if necessary before publishing. To quality check and Number 2, to quality check and preview how it plays on YouTube. Often I see things I want to change, and I repeat the process, uploading another version. On June 14th at 7:28 p.m., I received my first YouTube warning ever. Never had a warning before. When YouTube deleted 3 of those private cuts I was just talking about from my channel, they had not been posted or in any way shared publicly. This is like thought crime, guys. So you can see the picture there. That's their note warning to me. Now, there were other such rough cuts that YouTube did not identify as a violation, but I immediately deleted them anyway to be safe. So this is a screenshot I took right after YouTube removed those 3 private videos. Right there. So it's the starting at the 3rd one down. You can see because it's blank. It's a white thumbnail. Those 2 top there, and then a 3rd one at the bottom here, marked red with a red eyeball crossed out saying removed. All right. So now you'll notice you see all these other rough cuts around there. Those aren't removed, but I removed those anyway just in case. Interestingly, they're all 8 minutes and 2 seconds. You can see they're all like nearly identical to the one that I finally published, and which is still up. So I'm really nervous that's going to come down too. It's extremely odd to me that, one of these could be seen as a violation of YouTube's guidelines, while some are not. But hey, I'm just glad the other one's not taken down yet. Hopefully it doesn't come down ever. But to continue this article, so then June 15th at 5:42 a.m., literally the morning after my first warning, YouTube punished me with my first YouTube strike for one of the rough cuts. It was titled Crime of the Century 0612 Extended Card. So it's a rough cut. It. I mean, you can see these weren't published. They have no views, as you can see in the screenshot above, or a couple views, like single digits, because I'm reviewing them. And I had already deleted it the night before. And then the next minute, I received a second alert that another private cut with the same name that had already deleted the night prior as well was in violations of the guidelines too. So for this, I got a strike, my first strike. And YouTube warned that a second strike, well, the first strike, it banned me from uploading and streaming for a week. Then YouTube warned that a second strike would extend my ban for another week, and that a third strike will result in my channel being permanently removed by YouTube. Now, I received these emails as I was viewing my YouTube video library, so one can compare my video library the night before, which I showed you here, with this screenshot of my video library at the time of the email below, to see that the offending videos and all other of those private cuts, those private versions, had already been deleted the night before by myself. So here you can see this is the one that's still public, and that the only one that has ever been public. And these are the 3 that YouTube removed. So you can see that. And then there's my K-Hive video, which I did, which is the video I did before I covered this Ivermectin censorship. So that long list of videos in between, I had deleted myself. They're not there. You can't see them. And if they had been there when YouTube gave me a strike for it, you would see more of these with the of these blank thumbnails, because that's what happens when YouTube removes it on their own. This blank thumbnail remains, this placeholder remains. And you don't see that for any of those other ones because I deleted them. So my recent experience with YouTube reveals extremely troubling facts about YouTube's authoritarian control over important topics of discourse. If YouTube censors users even when they dutifully respond to their first warning, then YouTube is not offering fair warnings. How is that that's not a fair warning. If you respond to the warning appropriately and you get punished anyway, That's not a warning. That's not a fair warning. If you even think about posting a public video on YouTube that challenges the official narrative regarding ivermectin, YouTube may find you guilty of what is essentially a thought crime. For this, apparently you will not be entitled to a fair warning. Your work will be deleted, and your own voice on one of the world's largest public squares will be banned, if not permanently deleted. I find this incredibly concerning. Let's see. All right. So let me show you what YouTube's. Well, I'm going to play the video. I did the disclaimer. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm kind of terrified that, if I play this video in here and then all of a sudden just YouTube decides that this video is, a violation, then I get a strike for that video, and then I get a third strike for, it being included here. So I don't know what this is just so messed up on so many levels, because it obviously is an incentive and, fear that causes people to self-censor because they don't want to lose their platform, their voice in the largest public square, a video public square in the world. It's just, it makes no sense. Like, if those videos that they later gave me a strike for were in violation, why wouldn't they just group that in with those other 3 videos they said were a violation before? They're all the same exact duration, practically nearly identical videos. I make very minor version adjustments constantly. I'm constantly making little changes. And so they're just little changes. It's as if you couldn't fuck me over more if you wanted to, if you were trying to. So I'm going to play this video. All right. Well, DJ is saying don't risk it. It's still up. This is so confusing. All right. Well, let me show you. Let me explain why, what the hesitation, why people are so damn terrified about talking about ivermectin. Now, if I play the video, we'll explain why there's a worthy discussion to have, why this discussion should not be censored. And that's another thing. If you can see here, I have a disclaimer, and it's still, too dangerous according to YouTube. But the story is, I'll just play it, so you can just see the visuals as I talk about it. So many people died from COVID, obviously, hundreds of thousands of people in the US alone. But what happened was a doctor, Pierre Corey, right there, he testified, sharing all this evidence that he had compiled and analyzed from around the world, him and a group of doctors who, came together with the intention to just find a solution to this emergency pandemic. None of them are making any money. None of them have any, financial interest in ivermectin or any of the other cheap drugs that they recommend. And I just got to reiterate, just to be super safe. So he recommends trying ivermectin on a national scale. And I'm just pointing out the fact that evidence does suggest that it's beneficial in this, epic fight against COVID-19. I'm not claiming that it works. I'm just sharing the fact that there's evidence to suggest it works. Now, arguing that this medicine does work should not be censored anyway, but it is. Here is YouTube's community guidelines. Here, let me type in ivermectin, and it's ivermectin. The medicine is literally banned in their community guidelines. Now, this is one of the first times, or maybe the first time, that YouTube is really censoring stuff based on, what they claim is not true. Before, so hate speech is not so much that. There are problems with censoring hate, what they call hate speech as well, but this is the first time where they're have really brought down the hammer on stuff that, by removing content that isn't true, is with this COVID pandemic. And that's always when the censorship hammer comes down. It's one, times of war because it's an emergency, or another time of emergency, which is a pandemic, such as a pandemic. So they say, quote, that it's against community guidelines to any content that recommends use of ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine for the treatment of COVID-19. It's weird how they bulk them together like that. Because there's a lot more evidence supporting ivermectin than hydroxychloroquine. So you can't recommend them, and you can't. They also ban claims. You're not allowed to claim that ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine are effective treatments. And what's, really scary is, like I said, it seems like you're not even allowed to just share facts that some studies suggest it, which is not claiming that the studies are infallible and they're and therefore totally true. Because just because evidence suggests something doesn't mean it's true. The studies could be flawed, and to be totally fair, the argument. So that is the argument against ivermectin, is that the studies there's not enough evidence. They say there's not enough evidence. And for example, while there are a lot of studies, large scale studies, in countries, large cities, and even countries, there are not, what people refer to as the gold standard type of study. So these are, more expensive, more rigorous studies where there's double blinds. So, for example, the people taking the drug, they don't know which drug they're taking, if they're taking that or a placebo. And then the double blind is when even the doctor or researchers, they don't know what drug they're giving each patient either. But then it's all being kept track of, though, and so then you go back and see who benefited. You see what people took, who and what they, how they benefited. But at the time, they don't know at the time, because that could introduce bias, right? Because you could have a placebo effect if you think, if you already believe a drug helps you, then you could have that effect. Likewise, somehow a doctor could, theoretically introduce some bias too. Like, for example, if a doctor really believes in some medicine and they're giving it to people, they might interpret how a patient's status as better than they would have if they didn't know they were on this drug that the doctor believes in. See? So I think, I think that's valid to bring up. Sure, there are no double-blind study Actually, there might be some new ones. One may have just come out of Israel, I believe, which shows positive results. But my point is, sure, yeah, that's a valid argument that, who wouldn't want more evidence, but it's dangerous and wrong and ridiculous to not allow people to make the other argument. So you cannot, you're not having, you couldn't have a topic more important, more worthy of debate, of open discourse and debate than how to best defeat the COVID-19 pandemic. And by the way, the doctors who argue for ivermectin, they're not anti-vaccine. They've been smeared as anti-vaccine people. That's just not true. And considering not everybody in the world, in the US and in the world in particular, have access to these vaccines, considering many people are afraid of these vaccines because there are no long-term studies, they are not FDA approved. They're an emergency use authorization approved, which is totally different. The manufacturers of these vaccines are totally not liable. So understandably, some people are skeptical and hesitant to get the vaccines. It is what it is. And so I'm not saying that, people shouldn't do their, make their arguments to people that, hey, convincing people that maybe you should have the vaccine to reach herd immunity, right? But it is absurd to say that you cannot have conversations arguing that there's other ways to do this too. And considering so many people are not interested in taking the vaccine or don't even have access to it altogether, even if they did want to take the vaccine, why would you ban conversations of a widely available, highly affordable, cheap drug that has been, like ivermectin, that's been used since the 80s and has been administered to 4 billion doses or so have been given since its inception, and it's an incredibly safe drug. So you have the long-term studies seeing that, ivermectin is pretty damn safe. And we don't have that with the vaccines. And we really do, in order to kill the virus, we really do need herd immunity. And so why would you just basically quash a whole, like, it's as if you have two we have two armies that can flank this vaccine together. I mean, shouldn't just be limited to two, like vaccines and ivermectin. I mean, there's many ways to tackle this, and usually they are used together, like cortisol or some form of steroids has become a standard COVID treatment. But I guess my point is, it just seems absurd to like chop off one of your hands, like in this boxing match against the vaccine. Like, why would you dismiss anything? Just what's the harm in just talking about it? Because you need to talk about stuff if you want to come to the most informed conclusions. You know what I mean? But they're literally banning an entire argument. They're banning an entire argument. Like, if an argument is really so stupid, let it be exposed. Like the whole flat earth thing. Like, just think about the harm you would, like, it's just dumb, the idea that to ban that stuff. Some people go down the rabbit hole. Most people figure out that it's absolutely absurd. You know, but in the case of ivermectin, like, this is such a serious topic. Why wouldn't we explore every avenue? At least allow the exploration of every avenue. Content that recommends, yeah, Jesus Christ. Okay, now this is another important part of YouTube's new, COVID misinformation policy. And I say new, I mean it's been around for months, I believe, but new as in this is a whole nother level of censorship. So they say you're not allowed to share content that promotes prevention methods that contradict local health authorities or WHO. Honestly, I don't think. Yeah, anyone proposing or arguing for ivermectin is not contradicting local health authorities. They're just offering something new. But unfortunately, some of the health authorities, they basically have this. Their statement is that there's not enough evidence. That's basically what. So maybe in a sense, it's contradicting them. Now, here's why YouTube should not be banning people for challenging the WHO. Well, first of all, it's a logical fallacy to it's a logical fallacy that an authority figure is always going to be right. I mean, history is just filled with examples like this. The authorities were not right about weapons of mass destruction. The authorities were wrong about, smoking. Doctors used to see, doctors even recommending certain brands of cigarettes. It's just absurd. Doctors used to say you didn't need to wash hands. They didn't need to wash their hands, and a lot of people died because of that. Like, they spread illness and disease because they just didn't wash their damn hands. So the authorities often lag behind, and they're fallible. They can just straight up be wrong. In fact, the authorities were wrong about steroid treatment. I'm not a doctor, so I don't remember. I don't know what kind of steroid, but basically, Pierre Corey, this interesting factoid, very relevant. Pierre Corey, he didn't just testify in December of 2020, like he's doing here, but he testified in a Senate committee hearing in May of 2020, and he was arguing for the use of some kind of steroid to treat COVID. Now, then nobody was doing it, but it is now standard. It's standard, the use of these steroids to treat COVID patients. It's absolutely standard now. So that's just a clear example of how the authorities just lag behind. And it also should give him some more credibility. I mean, he was correct then, and yet they're not even gonna let him make an argument on a new idea now, on a new treatment now, even though he was right when he said there's this new treatment when it came to steroids. It's just unbelievable. Okay, so I'm going to show you. Now, this is why the WHO in particular should not be. We shouldn't be banning people for challenging the WHO, because, like I said, the authority figures, institutions, they're fallible. And just to illustrate that point, I've got the former Director General of the WHO to explain why. So this is that time the Director General of WHO, the World Health Organization, admitted that WHO is compromised. She said, I have to take a hat and go around the world to beg for money. And when they give us the money, they are highly linked to their preferences, what they like. So what she's described, I mean, now she doesn't use the words corporate capture, but that certainly falls under what she's describing. So, and the concern is, you know, the WHO institutions are influenced by their donors. It's just like people. They are compromisable, corruptible, compromisable. And let's listen to how she says it.
WHO is constantly losing power.
Okay, so this is from a documentary I saw and I recommend called Trust Who. It's a 2017 documentary. Here we go. So Margaret Chen, the former Director General of WHO, is being asked a question by this reporter here.
WHO is constantly losing power. Important donor nations, they want a weak WHO. One could even compare WHO to Titanic, I would say.
Okay, so that's quite a preface to her question. She is talking about how WHO is struggling for funding. And she compared WHO to Titanic because of this. That's quite a preface to this question. I mean, you can see in her face that's quite a way to start a question, but it's amazing how she responds.
So, isn't it your responsibility, Dr. Chan, to step down before the end of your second term in order to signal to the world that your organization, your ship is sinking?
Okay, I mean, this is incredible. So she just compared the WHO to the Titanic and told the Director General, asked her, shouldn't you step down to show like what an emergency this is? And I love how Margaret Chan responds.
You ask an excellent question. If I tell you, WHO as an organization, only 30% of my budget is predictable funds. Other 70%, I have to take ahead and go around the world to beg for money. And when they give us the money, they are highly linked to their preferences, what they like. It may not be the priority of WHO. So if we do not solve this, we are not going to be as great as we were.
That's incredible. So 30%. That's the Director General of the WHO, former Director General, explaining that she literally has to go around the world begging for money for 70% of her budget. And describing it in her own words, like take a hat around and beg for money. Now, a lot of this comes from special interests. Yep. Brian S. comments, cough, cough, Bill Gates. Yes. So that's one of the big donors. Yes. And he is literally invested in vaccines. Now, so it's just, you can see how, and you can see how an institution can get captured like this and influenced, and how they're not necessarily, operating. They're biased. Bottom line, they're biased. They can't, this makes them biased because, as she said, when they donate, it's attached to their preferences, right? And I think it's safe to theorize that the preferences of vaccine companies is to sell more vaccines. Now, while, luck in the US, citizens haven't had to purchase these vaccines, you could argue through tax dollars. Yeah. But those companies, they're making their money. They're getting money from the government to produce these vaccines. And so naturally, why would they want, their priority is profits. So if someone came along discussing the possibility that, a cheaper drug could also help, well, that cuts into their profits. So anyway, so that's why we shouldn't be banning stuff that challenges the WHO, because the WHO can be biased. Now, the WHO has done good work. Yeah, they practically eliminated smallpox. That's great. And they did a lot of other good stuff. But, I hope that clip convinces you that we should absolutely not be censoring people who challenge the WHO, because the WHO can be biased and, captured by special interests. All right, let's listen to it one more.
WHO is constantly losing power. Important donor nations, they want a weak WHO. One could even compare WHO to Titanic, I would say. So isn't it your responsibility, Dr. Chan, to step down before the end of your second term in order to signal to the world that your organization, your ship, is sinking?
You ask an excellent question. If I tell you, WHO as an organization, only 30% of my budget is predictable funds. Other 70% I have to take ahead and go around the world to beg for money. And when they give us the money, they are highly linked to their preferences, what they like. It may not be the priority of WHO. So if we do not solve this, we are not going to be as great as we were.
All right. Now, this documentary, which, goes into more detail of the history of the WHO, and, they acknowledge the WHO's good history, but they also point out some, concerning details, just showing that they're far from perfect. And this documentary was censored. Yes, it was. It was censored by Vimeo, actually. It was later put back up, but my God, I mean, this is terrible, guys. Let me show you, because when you take something down, you never get those views back, like that momentum back. You never get it back. Here, I'm gonna play the producer. I'm gonna let the producer of this documentary talk about this film, and I do recommend it, and how it was censored and what he had to say about that. Damn it. No audio. Okay. Well, thanks for pointing that out, guys. That's too bad. basically, let's see if I can. I had some notes, but I guess did they get censored? I took some notes in here. I could just read you the notes, but I guess I don't see them. Let's see. Well, hell, I'll give it a shout out. Trust Who 2017 documentary. Basically, he said that it's been fact checked by their lawyers and even fact checked by representatives from the Who, their whole documentary, right? So, and it had been up. Remember, this was made in 2017, so it had been up for a while. But in the wake of the pandemic, it was taken down by Vimeo. And he says that he's never been more sure of, information he wanted to share in his entire life. And I mean, come on, the fact that all the lawyers, but even more importantly, the WHO's representatives themselves verified the facts in this film. To see that get censored, it just shows you how massive this censorship campaign is. LinkedIn has been censoring stuff, literally just graphs that people have shared showing data that suggest ivermectin is effective. Even LinkedIn, obviously Facebook. Anyway, so I'll end. Well, actually, I'll should I end or should I continue? I could continue. I might continue and talk about another form of censorship called cancel culture. Now, I'm not one of the people that thinks cancel culture is anything new, but the technology is new, with social media, and that has basically changed the scale of this type of stuff. This stuff is happening on a larger scale, and everybody's seems to be participating in it. So, boosted by bots. I already did that one. So we'll do this. This is what I would like to talk about. Now, this happened a couple months ago, but the story is it's truly entertaining. And it's also, unfortunately, still very, very relevant. And so I'm going to share this story with you here. So the reporter who canceled me got canceled for racist tweets. And this story just goes to show how the cycle is just endless. Now, I was canceled by the Sanders campaign, like before my first day in the office. And this woman played a role. Her name is Alexi McCammond. So the reporter who canceled me got canceled for racist tweets. Former Axios reporter Alexi McCammond was recently disgraced for tweets she now admits were homophobic and racist against Asians. Consequently, she lost her privileged new position as editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue. It's unsettling to see people get canceled for age-old mistakes. However, McCammond's fall from grace is seen as poetic justice to some, considering not long ago she was working to cancel others. I know because I was one of those people. In 2019, I was hired by the Bernie 2020 campaign after my viral video significantly outperformed the campaign's first official ad. Soon after announcing my hire, McCammond shared a tweet smearing my character, adding that a decade-old video of mine was pretty awful. Quote, pretty awful. A short time later, I received a frantic call from Bernie 2020's campaign manager, Faz Shakur, telling me that press was hounding him for a response. I quickly drafted a response explaining that over 10 years prior, I had comedically edited Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous I Have a Dream speech, to say, quote, "I have a dream to take drugs," and other ridiculous things to warn people of how easily media can be manipulated to deceive people. You know, good comedy's got some real world inspiration behind it, and I had that. So moreover, this intention was well documented, as it was clearly stated in the YouTube video description for a decade. Me explaining that the purpose of the video, in addition to being an attempt at comedy, some people did find it funny, was to show how easily media can be manipulated and twist reality. And I mean, what's a better example than showing people? One way to show people is to show them a video that everyone's familiar with, like the I Have a Dream speech, and chop it up into something that's completely different. It wouldn't work if it was, if I had altered a video that nobody was familiar with. It had to be something that everyone's familiar with. And that, I think, is the most famous American speech. So that's why I chose that. Okay. So even though I'd explained my intentions, Shakir, 10 years prior, and Shakir suggested that I add my resignation to my written response, which I did. I don't want to work with anyone that doesn't want to work with me. And they didn't owe me anything. I volunteered my time making videos. They didn't owe me anything. So if they don't want me, I gladly, not gladly, but I did not hesitate. I was like, okay, I'll add my resignation. And, but here's the thing. But considering my entire reputation and future were suddenly at stake, I chose not to make my response public until I'd given it more thought than 1 single hour. However, my working draft was published immediately without my consent by Alexi McCammond. This shows that behind the scenes, McCammond had been pressuring Shakir to respond to my otherwise insignificant 10-year-old video. She was obviously one of the media that Shakir was referring to that was hounding him for comment. And literally she posted my working draft. It wasn't public. And there were literally like incomplete sentences, and people responded to the tweet pointing out that like the sentence aren't even complete. Like, was this even, ready to be published? So it's just messed up. But hey, I get journalists do that. I get it would be naive to think obviously, hey, I appreciate WikiLeaks. So I'm not hating on somebody for necessarily publishing, leaking and publishing material. But here's the thing and I'll explain it in this paragraph. So Shakir, he was scared stupid by the poor optics. So he leaked my draft to her, and I'd updated it with my resignation. After I updated it with my resignation. Incredibly, around that time, McCammond was the only Axios reporter covering the 2020 Democratic primary, one of the most crowded primary fields in history. And she chose to focus time on a decade-old YouTube video to publicly shame someone so far down the totem pole as a video editor. You had all those Democratic Party candidates. Even if she wasn't the only person at Axios covering the 2020 primary, as was reported, then and that's still absurd. You had all these Democratic Party candidates, and you're putting this effort to fuck over a video editor over a 10-year-old comedy video. Now, McCammond aimed to shoot down celebrities too, though. The following month, she shamed the NBA's Charles Barkley, a legendary jokester, for uttering a joke in a casual group setting. So McCammond tweeted, "Just FYI, Charles Barkley told me tonight, quote, I don't hit women, but if I did, I would hit you. And then when I objected to that, he told me I couldn't take a joke." So she's sharing this with this is what she's mostly known for. Is nothing got more attention than this. Like, she's never actually done a story that actually meant anything. At least, hey, I haven't looked at her whole stuff, but it seems like it's, this is the cream of the crop. It's just this bullshit about Charles Barkley, unfortunately. So, and then here's a picture. So you can see it's just Charles Barkley standing in a circle in a bar, and Alexi McCammons appears to be in this circle with them, on the other side of the circle at the time of the photo anyway. And it's just a casual group sitting in a bar, and people are joking around. And this started, now why did Barkley make that comment? Well, McCammond, Barkley had earlier been saying that he supported one Democratic Party candidate, and then a representative of Pete Buttigieg came in, and Barkley said he supported Buttigieg, and Alexi McCammond called him out in front of everybody about that. It's like, she goes, "You just said you supported this other candidate." And so she was kind of, joking at him, right? And he responds with a joke himself. But apparently that's, so that just needs to be shared with the world. This little interaction in the bar. Now, even though Barkley made clear it was a joke, and even though Barkley was responding to McCammond poking fun at Barkley, she declared that the joke was, quote, not okay. She says, "There are almost no times I will break an OTR agreement, off the record agreement, but this is not okay. And it was all because he came in talking about how he loves Deval Patrick. And once someone from Pete's campaign came around, he said he loved Pete, and I reminded him he previously said he was a Deval fan." She accused Barkley of misogyny and threatening violence with his joke, which explicitly said that I do not hit women. She goes on, quote, "Threats of violence are not a joke, and no person deserves to be hit or threatened like that." She lectured. Okay. She goes on, "The comments Charles Barkley made to me are not acceptable. Threats of violence are not a joke, and no person..." Well, it was definitely not a threat of violence. He explicitly said it was, he does not hit women. It was just an expression of his, he got pissed off, and he was obviously hurt by her joke. Anyway, silence only allows the culture of misogyny to fester, and those kinds of comments don't merit off the record protections. Now, this would go on to bite her in the ass too. Okay. Ironically, McCammond's romantic partner would later threaten to destroy a female journalist at Politico and submitted her to disgusting sexist attacks for exposing McCammond's unethical reporting practices. And unlike Charles Barkley, McCammond's partner was not joking. No. A few months after announcing her engagement to another man on MSNBC, Politico revealed that McCammond had entered a serious secret relationship with the Biden White House Deputy Press Secretary, TJ Ducklo. A clear journalistic ethics violation, considering McCammond continued to report on the Biden administration. And one can't help but wonder, she had this secret romantic relationship with this Biden. Before he was deputy press secretary, he was I think deputy campaign manager for the Biden campaign in the 2020 campaign. And so I can't help but wonder if it sure seems like, that's her bias, right? Is Biden. If that's the case, well, that's her motivation for fucking me over in the Bernie Sanders campaign over. I don't know. That seems like that could be the case. Okay. Let's show you this TJ Ducklow character, just so you know. There he is. So before the Politico story broke, Ducklow threatened its author, Tara Palmieri, telling her over the phone, "I will destroy you if you publish this story." He also vowed to ruin her reputation if she published. And that's how it was worded in the Variety Fair. Yeah, Vanity Fair. Jesus Christ. So if that's the case, if that was separate, if the vow to ruin her reputation was separate from "I will destroy you," then "I will destroy you" sounds like a physical threat. Either way, it's fucked up, though. Ducklow continued his abusive attack, accusing the female reporter of being, quote, jealous that a man, quote, wanted to fuck McCammond and not you. Now, that actually is sexist. The Biden campaign put Ducklow on a 1-week suspension for this. So this is infinitely worse than, anything than, typical cancel culture bullshit, like 10-year-old tweets and all. This is serious abuse of power. That's incredibly fucked up. To threaten a journalist for publishing a true story, that's fucked up. That's not the type of people you want in power. And Biden campaign put him on, or I guess it's not the campaign. Jesus, I got to go back and edit. Biden administration, they were in the White House at this point, put Ducklow on a 1-week suspension. Now, eventually, Ducklow, there was some backlash, as there should be, and Ducklow did later resign. So it appears that finally somebody who actually deserved public backlash for abusing their authority, who suffered some repercussions, finally. But most of the people who lose in today's cancel culture are not dangerous egomaniacs like McCammond's partner, or scheming political operatives like McCammond herself, who have the support of large propaganda networks like MSNBC. Most victims of cancel culture are regular people you've never heard of. One example is Christine DeVitt. DeVitt was a social media manager at Teen Vogue who called for McCammond's resignation for old tweets. Later, it was discovered DeVitt herself had objectionable old tweets too. In 2009, she used the N-word, calling a friend the N-word with an A. And soon after being publicly shamed, she was no longer employed, updating her bio to formerly Teen Vogue. While this appears to be another fitting example of poetic justice, it's still concerning to see someone cast to the street for casually uttering a single word 12 years ago with no ill will towards anyone. I imagine most people can look back at their past and see things they would never do or say quite the same way in the present. Unfortunately, it seems often only those with friends in high places can most effectively recover from the financial and social damage of getting canceled. Luckily for McCammond, she is one of those people. So despite her glaring hypocrisy, admittedly bigoted statements, and proven history of unethical journalism, McCammond was quickly scooped back up again by the corporate news at MSNBC and NBC. So, I mean, I don't what to say about this. I mean, this just shows how absurd, it's just a never-ending cycle. Because everyone's said something that you can, frame that you can smear them for, that you can, that obviously they meant no harm by, obviously they've changed, but because they were more immature, or they said something offhand, or they just made a casual joke in a bar, they have their career threatened and maybe even lost. But so I think I am happy to say that I've never been, what one thing that does separate me from the two women mentioned in this article is I was never advocating to cancel anybody for 10-year-old tweets and bullshit like that, or for a joke. No. Now, I did say that I don't think Joe Biden should be president because he was one of the leaders in the Democratic Party to get us to go into the Iraq War as chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee at the time. But anyway, now I think it's also interesting to see, and just people got to recognize that it just shows all this is bad. It's all bad faith attacks. It's just all political. It's politically motivated bullshit. And so McCammond was somebody that she, shared this tweet, retweeted this tweet that was smearing me. She said she thought it was, I forget her wording, like pretty bad or pretty awful. She called it awful. And then she went, behind the scenes, she pressured Fashiker to respond. And in this case, he responded with resignation, or forcing my resignation. That's just, but then when it happens to her, what happens? Well, she did lose that job at Teen Vogue, but she immediately got scooped up again by MSNBC and NBC. And typically those networks will take the bullshit smear and propagate it. They did that with me. Or at least NBC did. So, and yet, when it's their friends, they don't do that. So it's just, and that's how you know that that it was politically motivated bullshit. My video was not racist. Her tweets, she admitted, were actually racist. But I lost a job for my video. She did lose her job as well, but then she immediately got scooped up again by this massive propaganda network, MSNBC and NBC. It just, and see, I think people, progressives in particular, need to realize that they're not like playing fair. That these attacks, when people attack progressives for, sometimes an attack is legitimate, but oftentimes people are really reaching, and when they have to dig 10 years back and, say like a comedy video was just too offensive to allow this person to work, that's just absurd. and you can see that they don't go by their same like what you could say the same thing, actually worse. What she did, like I said, is worse considering she admitted it was actually racist, her statements. But it made no difference to MSNBC and NBC. They scooped her right back up. Anyway, all right, but enough about this. This really is nothing new. This aspect of cancel culture, although with people's histories now living online because of social media, it's it's just so much easier to do that, and it happens all the time, unfortunately, because people are dumb and and yeah, and people are dumb, and that's I guess that's what we'll end on. I want to thank let's see, I did get a super chat. I can't see it now because I'm using a third party thing, but if I do get a new super chat, I will give you a shout out anyway. Thanks everyone for the support. I'm flattered you guys tuned in to watch some of this. Censorship is a serious issue. Cancelship on a lesser level is obviously a form of censorship, and these are big problems. I've experienced with both now, and I'm going to continue talking about these issues. It's just amazing how American politicians and voters, they're always talking about how bad authoritarian Russia and authoritarian China are. And yet the whole time, our own politicians and our voters are just like falling asleep while our politicians are just pushing us to basically morph into authoritarian China and Russia with, for example, this serious censorship that's going on. And people talk about, something people will immediately respond saying, oh, but in the US, while everyone can acknowledge that Russia and China censorship is serious and awful in those countries, but then they'll excuse US social media censorship because it's private companies. Well, the private companies in China, the censorship in China is primarily being carried out by private companies as well. Now, this is anyway. Maybe that'll be my next video to dive into that and just the comparisons. Now, they're not at the same scale at the moment, but there's a lot of things to compare, a lot of similarities, and it's thoroughly disturbing, terrifying. All right, so on that happy note, thanks again for watching. Please support me on Patreon. I could really use the help. I've got some cuts of some Young Turks remixes, kind of exposing them for being frauds and assholes, and smear artists attacking Jimmy Dore and Aaron Mate. So I made some of those while I was banned, and they, you can see them on Patreon. My patrons can see them, and you can give me some suggestions. I will be uploading them soon to YouTube. So yeah, become a patron, get those sneak peeks, and yeah, help me out. Thanks for the help. Peace out, everyone.